to 8 hours. Yeah. So I might be just up to yeah, so.
Testing, 1, 2. Testing, 1, 2.
That is really quiet. I don't know why. So you, Tony? 1, 2? No, yeah, that's super anyway. Anyway, we'll worry about that music first. Yeah, I don't know. Sure. All right. So, I guess, do you want to start by welcoming everyone? Or do you want me to just start? Welcome to the combined Melbourne Adobe developers / Sencha Australia, or Sencha Melbourne based Sencha Australia meetup. Just for all the people who are on the Sencha side of things, we meet every second month. So once a month, we catch up about all sorts of different Sencha things, or third-party related stuff to do with JavaScript development and stuff like that. So tonight I'm just gonna we're going to talk about two different things. I'm going to cross over to Tony, and he's going to show you a little, basically to do with Sencha Touch. I might talk just a little bit about Sencha's kind of setup. Sencha has two main frameworks: a mobile framework for phones and tablets, the other framework for desktop. Up to now, now that as of XJS 5 supports tablets as well as desktop. Doesn't support phones, and Sencha Touch covers all the rest of mobile. Sencha Space is you could say it's like a secure. Sencha hate me for saying this, but it's like a secure PhoneGap application where you can run multiple HTML5 apps within one container, but they all have secure sandboxes between them. So just say you, like for instance, Telstra, they might have 18 different internal apps. Why have 18 apps on a phone when you can have one which has 18 different apps inside it? So it's a nice little container. You can tunnel. We can do all sorts of stuff. Tony might be able to speak a bit more to what its limitations are a little bit. It's pretty cool. But so that's their other offering. Sencha Command is their command line tool. It's very powerful. It's built on Java. But basically it's got every man and his dog rolled into it, everything from Node to Ant to you name it. It's good. So you need to install Ruby and a couple other prerequisites, but then basically it will compile your code, it will minimize it, it will strip out all the classes inside the Sencha libraries that you're not using with your code, so it'll minify all the code that way. So just say you're not using any of the grid stuff, it'll just strip all that out in the build process, all that sort of stuff. It'll then run Sass build stuff to build all your CSS and minify that and spit that out, and then anything else you want to attach to that as well. It's pretty cool. Sencha Architect is their IDE. It's a visual IDE. It's kind of what Dreamweaver always wanted to be as far as clean code. It's very clean. It's very best practices type code. I'll show you a little bit about that as we go along. When I do a couple of demos, I'll show you around Architect just quickly and show you some of the new features that came with XJS 5. They also have an Eclipse plugin for people who like Eclipse or those sort of IDEs. And then obviously they make most of their money out of the sport training consulting arm and that sort of thing. So really tonight we'll be focusing on XJS, Sencha Command, Sencha Architect kind of products. And then Tony will be touching on Sencha Touch, which is the mobile framework side of things. So what I might do is I might throw over to Tony at this point. So I'll just drop back out of here. Are you there, Tony?
Yes. Hi. Okay, I was going to do some screen sharing here. Just a minute.
Yeah, it's coming out of this speaker, even though I've told it to go that one.
Is it
okay?
Working okay?
Yeah, it's just the volume's a little low, but that's
A little
something to do
low.
with me.
Okay, I
So
might be able to do something
you,
about that.
you keep going. I'll work it out.
Okay, cool. Okay, right. Okay, so up in front of you at the moment, hope you can see, is my right-hand side screen, and it looks a little bit boring at the moment, so let's make it a bit more interesting. What we actually got on the right-hand side is a little mobile phone emulator, and I tend to use for Android a new one called Genie Motion. If you actually download the Android development kit, you get one that comes from Google, but I found it's got a lot of problems, so I tend to use this one. So we're going to actually start by creating a new app from scratch, and what we're actually using is a new tool that I've developed called Sencha Touch Live. So I just thought I'd give you a little bit of background first. A lot of mobile phone apps are actually built as hybrid apps. So you can buy.
You're just a little blurry there on the feed, so see if you can just describe things in a bit more detail that are on the screen,
Okay.
just in case. Okay, cool.
Okay, all right. So should I just slow down a little bit?
That's fine, just as long as you describe what's on the screen, just in case we can't.
Yes, I will. Okay, I'll do that. Okay, so a lot of mobile apps these days are built as hybrid apps. So that basically means that traditionally you could have built an app using the vendor's products, like so Google's, you get the Google Web Toolkit, Google Web Toolkit, Google's Android kit, or if you're going to use iOS, you'd use the Xcode system, and Windows Phone has their own. So basically, they could be native kits, and they'd run fast and great for building games. A large percentage of particularly business applications don't need necessarily the power of a gaming environment, and you can build them very effectively using web technology instead. And of course, Adobe has sponsored a. So I'm getting a little bit of echo at the moment.
Oh, sorry, I'll just mute.
Great, thanks very much, Chris. So Adobe has actually sponsored a project, what was an open source project called the PhoneGap project, and what they did is they actually built components that can slot into a web-based system, and those components are like plugins that extend the features of a browser so that you get access to all the device features. And because Sencha is actually essentially a web-based JavaScript framework, it can make use of that. So basically, we're going to run up a little build tonight, a little Sencha Touch tool, and it's going to run inside this PhoneGap framework. Now, normally you have to type a lot of commands to do all that, but I built a little tool that makes that a bit easier. And then it's got some other exciting features, which I'll show you a bit later. Okay, so let's go and build one. So with this little tool, we just type ST. So I hope you can see the text there. So test ST Live, this little tool. And then we're just going to say create, and let's invent a new name for something. So let's call it Brian, just for the sake of things. And actually we're going to run it as well at the end. So this is actually going to build a whole app from scratch and run it inside our emulator. Now before we start, we're going to start up one of the emulators. So I'm going to choose a Samsung Galaxy S5, and I'm particularly choosing a version of Android, the very latest version, 4.4. And the reason I'm choosing that version is because it has some new debugging features that integrate very well with the Chrome debugger, and we'll show that later on. So let's start up our little emulator. So you can see now it's starting up a little virtual device. And we'll just collapse it down a little bit. It's just not resizing itself for some reason. There we go. Okay, cool. And actually, for later on, I might actually start up a Google Nexus 10 as well. So that's a bit bigger, and I'll just leave that for later. Okay, let's get started. So we type this little run command, and what it's actually doing now is it started Sencha command in the background, which is one of the toolkit, some of the tools from Sencha, and it's creating a new application for us. And now it's actually running another Sencha command which actually integrates with PhoneGap. So it's actually initializing the PhoneGap part, the Cordova PhoneGap part into that application. And it's actually picked up a little name from the settings file that I've got. And now it's actually adding some plugins as well. So we're actually going to add the Android platform. We could have added iOS and Windows Phone as well. And now it's actually adding various plugins. Okay, so it's adding device orientation features, cameras, file access. It's got facilities for doing media capture. One of the things I need to do on this tool is do barcodes, and that's not part of the standard Cordova kit. It's actually something developed as a third-party kit. So I've got a little barcode scanner plugin coming in now. And then the other thing I need to do in my application is build databases. So I'm actually using a little SQLite database that's part of another sort of plugin. So there's a SQLite one coming in. And I can actually pull these off the internet. As you can see, it's fetching off the repository. Okay, now we're actually compiling the app. So the Sencha process actually will compile various classes which are written in JavaScript. It'll optimize them. It actually compiles also the style sheets that come with the system, compresses them all up, and then now it's actually building the PhoneGap part. So it's actually just doing it for Android platform. But if we had more platforms, it'd build it for those as well. So it actually run multiple compilers essentially for each platform we're supporting. Now it's just baking the barcode bits, and just give it a moment. Okay, it's taking its time. Now you can see it takes quite a while to do this. And one of the problems with building mobile apps is that you can spend quite a lot of time just sitting waiting for compilers. And so this toolkit I'm developing, going to show you tonight, will help show you how you can actually avoid all of that time delay. In fact, it'll allow you to live edit files inside the mobile devices instead of having to do all this long compiling process every time. So instead of having to wait for every time you make a code change, having to do it, here we go. Now it's starting up our app, and now this is not actually what the Sencha Touch app looks like. It looks like this one. We built one called Brian. Remember? So we've run Brian, and it's just this is just an empty shell. It's a little basic Sencha Touch app that the Sencha Touch system builds for you, and it's just like a starting point before you begin. So it's just got a very simple tab panel, and that's it. Okay, now let's go back, and we could run some unit tests. So there's a facility there to hook into the unit testing system. And now the interesting part I'm going to show you tonight is this little live update piece, and that's the real reason we built this app. Now the PhoneGap team have actually built something called PhoneGap Developer App, and I've actually had a good look at it, and I thought, hey, this is pretty cool. It's actually going to show you some of the pieces that some of the pieces that I've built are based on it. But the problem is, what it does is it locks you into a very fixed set of plugins, so just the ones that are available with the PhoneGap environment. But as you've seen, my app requires more plugins than that, and that's commonly the case. So what I've done is build a slightly different architecture, but rework some of the pieces they've got. So now you can actually drop in all your own plugins, including some internally developed ones if you like, and then bake a new app which you can live edit with your own plugins. And so to do that, we just type st-live serve, and that's about it. Now it tells me the current directory isn't a Sencha Touch directory. That's correct, because I've just made a new project. I've just got to change directory into that first. Now run up the server, and you see it's got an IP address and a port number, so we just click on here, and now we can actually connect to the live server, and it's found it, and now it's loading up all the files from my app. Now what's interesting here is that normally when it loads up an application that's been compiled and optimized, it would actually have all these files sort of squeezed into one, and they'd be all compressed. But I actually don't want to do that when I'm debugging. When I'm developing an app, I actually want the individual files separated out in the original format. So that's what this tool does. It actually loads them up into the device, showing with the original format. It first of all registers the device, so that was the initial call, which tells it sort of what platform it's working on. And then from then on, it loads up some of the Cordova plugin JavaScript. And you notice that when it's requesting something like this, it's actually figuring out that you actually want the Android one. So it's going off to load the Android version of those scripts. If it was done in iOS, you'd see a different file there. Now it's loading up the Sencha touch files, which normally would be not as many as these. They'd be all compressed up in a finally compiled app. And then the little highlighted one is actually just the little piece of my code that I'm running on this tool. And so it's kind of just, this little tool just highlights your own code. So let's go and edit that. So I'm going to open up a little text editor. So for that, I've just got something called brackets. And I'm just going to go and find that file. So we're just going to refresh it. And there's the Brian application we just built. And we're going to go inside that and click on the view called main. And that's actually the code for this little view that we're seeing over on the right-hand side. So I'm going to change the text of it. Instead of saying welcome to Sencha Touch, I'll just say welcome to Brian. Oops. And all I'm going to do now is save it. And I'm just going to take this out of the way so you can watch what the server's going to do. So I'm just going to hit the save button. You notice it picked up the file. Now the client is talking to the app and it's changed the title on the top of the app. Okay, so you can see it's actually changed the text. So I can actually make any sort of change I like. I could change it to a different sort of, perhaps I could change it to not from a tab panel, but to an ordinary panel, and then perhaps rip out one of the panels like this. And save, reloads it. Now I haven't got two panels, I've just got one. Okay, so we'll undo it. We're back to where we were and save it again. So basically I can live edit my code in the actual device. I don't know why we got two little tabs there. It must be a little typo. Oh, I know, that's because I didn't make it a tab panel again. Okay. There we go, back to the original. Okay, so so now we can actually dramatically speed up the amount of time we spend developing apps, not having to reload them all the time. Now, if you've actually got apps that have different resolutions, like this is a case where I've got an app which is a tablet, I can actually also review perhaps an app that's got different layouts on different screen sizes and check them all in one go. I can even put real hardware in front of me, so it doesn't have to be these emulators. I can stick iOS or Android equipment in front of me, attach them, and reconnect them. Perhaps I've got an emulator that's running on a different machine. I don't even have to cart my source code across between machines. I can just run it all on the same one. Now, finally, we've got some more little tricks up our sleeve. So another thing we can do with this is we can say local tunnel. So we can say local tunnel. And what that does, starts up our server. But now we've actually got a connection right. It's actually punched a hole through our firewall and proxied this server out on the internet on a random address. So you can see the little address down the bottom here. That's actually a real live connection to my server out on the internet. I didn't even have to host it, no hosting cost. I can now demonstrate it to other people. I can have some testers go and connect up and have a go at it. So that's another very useful feature. Of course, I've just added a feature this afternoon, so we can do this one as well. So we can type test QR, start it all up, and we can now get QR codes. So we can now actually turn those little URLs into QR codes and scan them on our devices and load them up as well. I haven't yet integrated that into the client, but I'm sure we'll do that soon. And there's some other little features as well. Now, inside our project.
Just leave that QR code up there for a sec.
Okay, you want to go and open it? It's not going to work very well just yet.
Okay, just leave it there for 10 more seconds.
Now I've got to get it out of the way. I had a crack at it this afternoon, and it's not loading.
Okay, so it's not fully.
So it's work in progress.
It's this afternoon's feature.
It's this afternoon's feature. Okay, so I lost my little slot here. Okay, so when you actually go to the Brian project inside the resources pod. I'm just going to kill this one.
Live stream.
And we often compile our application by using SAS files. So these are all. And unfortunately, SAS files aren't in the format we need for our final application.
Okay, so we use SAS files, like compass stuff.
So we can say base.
I'll touch on that after.
And say red. And save it. Now that's not going to do very much for me because you're running the compiler that will trim. So let me just go and get that up. Okay. So what I need to do here is start up the SAS compiler. Now it's running a little compiler in the background, which will watch changes to the file I just edited.
Is that just running Compass? Is that running Compass?
That's running Compass.
Yeah.
Yep. And so now let me just save that. I might need to restart my little client. Okay, I think I might need to. Okay, so notice it's compiled it. And then the
this is building
has detected the change in the application. I'll just go back and reload it. Normally we'd pick that up on the auto change, but we dropped our connection in between. Okay.
So normally you'd have to do a lot of these steps manually. You'd have to then run scripts, go check it, come back.
Yeah,
so this is just automating all these processes. And you could run it up onto like 200 things at a time and test it all on all the different platforms all at once.
Yeah, so one bonus having a local is that we can actually connect a device and test it on hundreds of machines. Okay, this little thing's going to get some. This is actually a known bug, and of course you always hit it in the demos. And I'm going to have to restart this app. So unfortunately. So let's just go off to settings, kill the app. It's the Brian one, and I'm just going to stop. And go back. And yeah, sometimes I've just noticed it disconnects. So there's a little bug there I've got to fix. Yep, here we go. Now it's reconnected. There we go. Now we got a Brian, a red Brian. And if I just test it live, I can just do a green instead. Hit save. SAS compiler fires. Now the ST live fires. Now it reloads. There you go, brick green. Okay, so you get the idea. So you can instantly change your styling and lots of other things in the SAS system, much more sophisticated than this. But we're just showing you the concept tonight that you can now live edit your tools, and that's very, very valuable, especially if you've got multiple machines in front of you. You can actually try them out on platforms all in one go.
Have you tried that out in combination with Architect yet?
I haven't yet, but there's no reason why.
Pretty much the same. Okay, cool.
Yep.
That'd be awesome.
Yep.
Even more awesome.
Okay, I think I'm done. There might be some questions people have.
Was that any questions, or that mostly go over your head, or the bits that didn't go over your head? Oh, it's good. pure. Is there any questions? No?
This is the first one I heard of Sencha. So who's that by?
Sencha is a company that they're a startup in California. They created a JavaScript framework in 2006. It's the main desktop competitor, I'd say, to jQuery until Angular came along. Since 2006. So I'd say they're the three kind of leaders at the moment in the desktop switch. Yeah, no, PhoneGap is a wrapper. Yep. It's kind of like jQuery mobile. It's an HTML5 framework, yep, but you use it to build mobile apps.
So it compiles it to...
Yeah, so to hybrid apps. Yeah. Okay. So you're still creating HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, but then you're putting it into PhoneGap. But what Sencha Command does, and then ST-Live does on top of that, is gives you an abstraction layer. So it does a lot of that work for you, compiling it and pushing it into PhoneGap.
Okay, so you use it in conjunction with PhoneGap?
Yes, yeah. The PhoneGap stuff is actually baked into Sencha Command now. So the libraries are actually baked in. So you basically go build, deploy.
Right.
Yeah. So
and also Sencha Touch has its own wrapper classes for helping you access the PhoneGap device features.
Is this something you buy or is it a license?
It's GPL free and commercial. So you pay a developer license, which is actually it's free for Sencha Touch.
Yeah.
XJS has got a commercial license, but Sencha Touch is free for commercial use as well.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. So, and Sencha Command's free, and the only thing you really pay for is Sencha Architect or if you got a bundle with XJS. If you want charts as well. Sorry, that's the other exception. There's there's some pretty cool touch charts that get bundled in, but you're talking even if you got everything Sencha has in a bundle, it's about $1,000 per developer. So as a one-off, so you can do as many apps as you want. So. But you can also just develop for free. Just use Eclipse, just use Sencha Command, Sencha Touch, do whatever you like. Yeah.
So when let's say I did an app and I'm going to release the iOS version, you still got to go through the app developer.
Yep. Yeah.
You still got to have
that's right. You're still publishing through PhoneGap the same way you would any other web framework, hybrid framework. Yeah.
And apart from really low level data stuff, let's just say we scrape from data. What's the performance like? Is it
really good? Yeah, that's what makes Sencha Touch kind of a leader. In fact, what I might do is put a couple of links to some of the stuff. They did this Facebook comparison because obviously Zuckerberg said hybrid slow, so Sencha made a copy of Facebook's app and put it beside Facebook's app, and it's a lot faster than Facebook's app.
Oh, is it? Right.
So that was kind of a really cool PR stunt.
One of the key things that Sencha Touch brings and the is that it abstracts on top of HTML. So HTML
it does it with management for you.
It's like an assembly language. Rather than you're running high-level JavaScript classes.
Yeah.
And they generate the HTML for you. And consequently, it can optimize the DOM a lot. So it can do all sorts of tricks like minimizing the amount of the size of the documents, the objects that create. So if you do scrolling, it's shuffling around little patterns of divs around automatically for you on the fly. It's preloading data
for scrolling and things like that. That you have native.
Very sophisticated thing. Much more sophisticated than you're going to get out of something like get out of mobile, other mobile frameworks that are just HTML based.
Yeah. So like jQuery mobile, for instance, that's more of a web brochure type, mobile framework. Whereas you do responsive design type stuff with that sort of stuff. But if you want really optimized fast mobile, then you have to start going to some of the more you could say full stack JavaScript frameworks like Sencha, Kendo. Angular's slowly getting there. Some people say it is there, other people say it's missing a lot. It'll get there because Google's got the resources eventually. So it's so quick. It's been a leader for years.
definitely better than doing like say native iOS.
For a productivity app, it's a no-brainer. If you're doing like a business app that was an RSS reader effectively, like you could do this in minutes, like rather than a week or whatever. I mean, its main comparison really is Xamarin, but there's a lot of pros and pros about that too. You still got to write your own code to a degree anyway in Xamarin. So
yeah, with Xamarin, the problem is you end up rewriting a lot of the UI, although the back end is the same. They're working but the reality. And whereas Sencha, you tend to be out almost 100% code reuse between platforms. You're not rewriting things.
Yeah.
And it does have quite smart tool for adapting code or the models of the code between different platforms. So you can reuse the max amount of code.
Is there a lot of third-party support for like just the UI kits and stuff like that?
So what was that?
Is there a lot of third-party support for like UI kits? You know how like there's Bootstrap and all these stuff. So
with Sencha's frameworks, they've actually built their own. Like they built a lot of SAS mix-ins and all those sort of things to allow you to customize. I'll talk to that just quickly when I go through the XJS stuff in a minute as well, because there's some base themes and then you can basically extend off that. So,
in general, if you're doing mobile jQuery or other sort of open source toolkits, you're often assembling a lot of pieces together. Often, they give you a core piece that you've got to go and find all the other bits. Whereas Sencha's is a smorgasbord, and it's all
virtually together. Right there.
Yeah.
To a degree.
I guess what I'm saying is like if there's a whole bunch of people developing on Sencha, and then you start getting kind of like similar look between the apps, and I don't think it's whipping, but is there support so that you can make your app look like a generic?
Oh yeah, well, I'll show you in a minute when I get into the architect stuff for XJS. Okay. But you can apply different things to different platforms.
All right. Yeah.
So you can tweak it. So like obviously you don't want your Windows mobile looking like your iOS.
Yeah.
So because otherwise, like firstly they're not going to get approved because Apple will be like, I don't want any Windows Phone apps in my store. So although there are a few, but they're very rare.
They've actually added quite a support in the framework, in the touch framework, to make standard widgets and components behave like a particular platform. So some appear from the top instead of just because that's a conventional on that particular platform. And so a lot of that stuff is done for you baked in.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, I might cover off on some of that in my part of the preso.
Yep.
As well.
Yep.
All right. Just stick there for a minute. Just tell me. I'm just going to bring up the screen. Just make sure it comes up. So thanks for that, Tony.
All right.
And I'll just push on with some XJS.
Cool.
Oh, excellent. Come on. There we go. All right. So just switch across to this screen. Alrighty. Cool. Alright, so as I was saying before, these are the different frameworks that Sencha has, tools, and other parts of it. So let's get into XJS, what's new in XJS, and then we'll talk to some of the things that you were asking as well as we go. So alright, so there's stacks of stuff that's new. Like 5's almost like the Pandora's box of toys as far as people who've seen Sencha stuff before, and people who haven't will think it's pretty cool as well. So, alright, so let's start with some of the things that are new. Obviously, the big thing is tablet support. So now, basically, you can build your desktop app, and you can know that your CEO or executives can use it on any touch device that isn't a phone. Phone is the exception to it. Excuse me. MVVM has come into XJS 5. This also gives us two-way data binding and some of those great data features that you see in a lot of modern frameworks. In the past, Sencha's been an MVC framework, so for those sort of paradigms, but it just made it very messy when it got to the controller, because the controller got very top-heavy, trying to manage all the different views. So when you break it down to MVN, it obviously breaks that down into smaller packages, so you can manage it better. XJS has inherited Sencha Touch's routing library, which is just a standard routes or JS type routing. The Touch charts package is like pretty awesome charts package. We'll have a look at that in just a sec. Basically, with the charts package, you can not only just display charts, you can also do interactions. So you can drag your finger between two nodes and it'll tell you the difference and all that sort of stuff out of the box. You just turn that feature on. XJS has moved up to full HTML5 support. So by dropping IE6 and 7 in this version, they've enabled a lot more modern functionality and been able to get rid of a lot of legacy code, a lot of legacy shims. One of the things that XJS did really nicely in the past is when Sencha Command built the app, it would also run up a headless WebKit instance called PhantomJS, I think. And it'd actually take a screenshot and then slice up all the images so that IE6 and 7 could have all the CSS3 look and feel without having CSS3. So it was pretty cool. So you ended up with but the only problem is you end up with all these directories of images that are all sliced up, and it's just, yeah, it just makes your package quite large just because of images and stuff like that. So that's gone now. Accessibility is something else they've worked really hard on. They've baked this into the framework, whereas before it was a package that you loaded in after the fact and tried to hack in. So they've kind of listened to a few of us that have been working on government contracts. I was working on a bureau meteorology site, and we're having some serious issues trying to get the WK2AA support in, which ARIA is just one part of. Like it's quite an extensive thing if you're working for government. You'll find there's a lot of quite high bars to jump, and as of I think it's November this year, it's all mandatory to have that in any web app. Although I'd say 90% of apps probably won't have it by then in government. But anyway, all right. The other big thing is XJS now has a shared core with the next version of Sencha Touch. So basically, instead of having two different libraries, eventually the idea is to merge into one. But this means that all your models, basically all your data elements inside your app, you can share them between your mobile and your desktop app without having to rewrite anything, which is pretty cool. There's a few other things there for people who have used it before. Field layouts have been reworked so that they're all fluid. This is all to do with moving to HTML5. Grid widgets. These are basically visualization widgets or single instances that display different UI elements inside like a grid. If we go into, I'll just flick quickly across to the docs. Let's bring that up. So Sencha.com. Alright, so this is the new docs as well. There's a whole new documentation system that they've put out for version 5. If you come up here, you can go to the examples, and that will come up with a whole bunch of different demos and things like that. So you can go through all the different items here. Okay, so if we go into grids are probably the poster child of XJS. Like since 2006, there's only really been one other grid that even performed anywhere near it, and now this is pretty much, I reckon, on par with any high-speed grid out there. You can load a million records into it and it won't blow up. It does a whole heap of buffering and DOM tricks to make it look like your data's going through real time, even though it's not. So, all right. So if we go into where are we? I'm just going to somewhere. We'll just go back up here. Actually, I might go to kitchen sink example. That's probably a better one to hit. So just load up this. Where's that grid? There. Alright, so here we go. Here's our widget grids. So widgets are something they've added in XJS 5. It just means you can put real-time data inside visualizations. So basically, in this case, we've got a whole bunch of different graphs and charts. Everything in here. This feature was especially requested by financial services companies and share trading companies and those sort of places that need real-time stats, real-time graphs and charts. So every one of these is real-time. We can run in all sorts of configurations, and you won't find any performance issues there either. Let me just see. I'll just see if there's another one there, but I think we'll just skip back to the slides there. All right, so widgets thing. So one of the big problems with putting what they call in Sencha terms as a component or some sort of widget inside a grid is it usually kills the performance of the grid, especially if you're updating it constantly. This will just update seamlessly and you won't even realize that it's refreshing. Like it's just really nice. All right, so let's go back. There's a whole bunch of new UI components as well, and there's obviously some new themes. As you can see here in the middle, traditionally you'd probably look at that and say, oh, that's probably a jQuery, some sort of responsive app done with like Bootstrap or something like that. You're correct, that is done with Bootstrap and XJS. So now you can use Foundation or Bootstrap with XJS, whereas in version 4 and before it was pretty hard because in version 4 and before they used the adaptive layout, not responsive layout. In XJS 5 they use both. So you can use responsive, you can use adaptive, or you can use hybrid. So you can even say, oh, but I want, and adaptive's more like JavaScript-driven sizing and measuring, and then responsive is obviously using CSS and using more, you could say the modern way to resize things. What you can also do is use the adaptive way and just say, all right, everything inside here is responsive and everything outside is adaptive. So you can have the best of both worlds, which is pretty cool. So you can measure up everything and then just say, all right, let everything inside that container just float the way you'd expect it to, which is pretty sweet. All right. Another big performance increase is the event system now uses top-down delegated events instead of and uses a target rather than clicking on elements and then passing that through the browser. So you're going to get a lot better performance there. Gesture support obviously comes with the touch support. So you get that with mouse gestures as well as touch gestures. So you can do all sorts of really cool stuff with the mouse too. Because one of the things that people have been asking for, especially in Sencha Touch for a while, is the ability to use the mouse. So when they're building it out, they can click around and do things. So this is like kind of bringing that in as well. Dashboards. Dashboards basically are just like your management type dashboards. I'll just click back here. Actually, if I get in here. So if we go to executive dashboard, you've seen these a million times. Everyone wants a drag and drop dashboard on their app. Most of the time everyone's like, no. So basically all these sort of dashboards you can just create very easily, and it's been broken down into 3 components: a dashboard component, column component, and I think it's a portlet. So you can actually, it's all pre-done. You just inherit from those classes, and then everything just clicks in. You can resize columns, all sorts of different stuff out of the box. And then obviously you can make pretty stuff like this. So let me see if there's another. Let me just go back to here. And here's another example of that. That's probably more obvious. So this is more literal. So it's a bit like your Google idea. So out of the box, you can basically just extend from these classes, and then you've got yourself a nice portal layout. So, and then you can just, if you want a bit thinner, just drag to a bit thinner, and all that sort of dynamic coolness. So make it as big as you want, as wide as you want, all that sort of things. So you don't have to do any of that work to get all that sort of stuff. And this is really the power of XJS, and this is why people love it, especially top 500, like Fortune 500 companies, because it means You don't have to sit there and reinvent the wheel with widgets and UI components that have always been there, like in Windows and Mac and all those sort of things. They're just there, you know. So it's like having Windows but in HTML, which is pretty cool. All right, let's just quickly go through some of the other things. We've got a whole heap of new Sass mix-ins. This basically allows you to, as you saw with the demo back there, Tony just changed one variable. You can change the whole color of the app. Obviously, there's a lot more mix-ins. For every single UI item, there's a mix-in. So you can say, all right, with tabs, color them this way, give them this sort of look and feel. You might say, all right, we'll have 5 different colored toolbars for our 5 sections of the website. So you can create a sub-UI for each one very easily just with simple configs. So it starts to be extremely powerful in this sort of way. There's a couple of new themes. Obviously, we've added touch support for the themes that are there. We've added a new crisp theme, which is for high-resolution devices. And when you talk about high-resolution devices, you're not just talking about tablets, you're also talking about super tablets, which are big, new 20-plus inch tablets, and you're talking about TVs, 4K TVs, all sorts of stuff that's coming out as well. So you need to start to think about, all right, what platforms are around as well, and this fits into that really nicely. The theming in XJS basically is tiered, so we've got a base theme. On top of that, we've got a neutral theme, then our Neptune and Classic, and then obviously our other themes built onto there. So basically, in any part of this tree, you can tap into the theme at that point. So you can skin it start skinning it from the full theme, or you can strip it right back to base, which is basically enough to barely render everything, and that's about it. So it gives you the power of starting wherever you want. So if you just want to change the colors, you can do that. Or if you want to change everything, you can go right back to base and neutral and really go to town. So it's up to you. So I'll talk about in Sencha Touch. I'll just quickly tangent across there for 2 seconds. In Sencha Touch, it's pretty much the same thing, but the themes are obviously different. Let me just come on. I'll just open up Sencha Architect for 1 second. Come on. There we go. All right. So this is Sencha Architect. So you can use this for XJS or Sencha Touch. So you just basically tell it which version you're building. You can say XJS 5, or you can say Sencha Touch 2.3. So if we want to build a mobile app, so want to build a contacts app, well, you can, it's already there. So if you wanted to build a contacts app, you just double-click it, open it, save it, and then hand it to your boss.
Is that free? Architect, or
Architect's about $200.
so,
I think that's for a yearly license.
Yeah.
I think it comes with the year updates. It might be for that version. I'm not sure exactly. I'd have to double check that. So basically, what this allows you to do is drag and drop all your different views, controllers, data models, all those sort of things in. I'll just talk to this just quickly. So on the left-hand side, you've got all your different components. So in this case, we're doing touch. So all the touch components are here. All the UI stuff, all the data layer stuff, everything, charts, you name it, all your different feed consumption. So your readers and your writers. You've got different types of stores, so JSONP, XML. In the commercial versions of XJS, you've also got a SOAP and an AMF reader. You'll only read unencrypted AMF, I believe. So if you've got Flex apps, you can use it to port those across as well. Then you've got all your filtering and all those sort of things in there as well as all your different components, checkboxes, sliders, all the different UI components you'd expect. We've also got a grid in our touch library, so you've got a touch grid, so if you need to do grids and all that sort of stuff, you can do that quite easily as well. And then you can add all sorts of other resources like Google Maps and all that sort of thing pretty easily as well. So the other really cool feature that's snuck into the latest version of Sencha Architect is this data builder. So what you can do is you can just, so models are, in the sense of Sencha, stores are a series of records and a model is a single record. So this is basically saying, all right, let's build the data side, one element of the data side of it. So what you can actually do is point it at a web service, and it'll go away and build it off a web service. So you don't even have to add all your model settings in, all your fields or anything like that. You can just pull those in. So if I just go, just quickly.
So you'll query the web service and
yeah. So if you just find a JSON. It's the countries in JSON. That'll do. It could be anything. I should go to all ones. So if we go back to our architect, we'll just put our JSON object in here. What do we got? What do we do wrong? Oops, all right. Add email field. Yeah.
It's missing the very last close bracket.
Code error there. So.
I think it's missing the last one. That's it.
It should generate basically all the fields down the bottom here. And then what you can also do is build out your model, your store, your list view, detail view, form view, and controller all in one. So, so that's just saved me like half an hour to an hour of sitting there configuring boilerplate my app. I can just go bang and it's generated. If you updated it, you just go into your model and store and just tweak it. I don't think it updates it at this stage. I think it just generates it, which gets you off the ground. But I mean, usually if you're updating a feed, you're not changing too much. Usually you're changing the name of a field, or you're adding a new field, or, and that isn't that hard to do. So, cool. All right. So basically, then we can just drag and drop things in. We've got our different areas of our application here. So we've got our views. Underneath, you can see the code as well. So you can see what code it's creating. So all of these different items are all individual files, which are all then compiled into one big file when you build your app. So in this case, we've got our favorite view. It extends a data view, which is an inbuilt type of Sencha Touch class. We give it an alias, which we can then use later to include it. So we've got favorite view here. So then if we, yeah, so basically, and then basically if there's nothing inside that data view, it's going to show some empty text. And then we've just hooked it up to a template install, and they'll render out our view. So pretty simple as that. So, and then that alias that you saw, like basically you could put that alias inside an X type and just drop it in here, and then that just drops that whole component into a UI as a child item of another layer. So this is pretty much the way Sencha configures all its UI classes. So you just have a class, and then you have items, and you add all your items, just build a UI. So, and if you go to the design side, then there's all your fields. It's the same stuff. So everything inside here that you can see in the UI, you can see in the code. You can also add custom items here. I don't know. Oh, this is a new version. What are they doing? You used to be able to add new items. Okay, I'll work that out. So yeah, so basically you can add your own config or your own programming. You can also include other resources in here. So you could go up here and say, all right, I want to put Google Maps in there, or I want to add I don't know, jQuery. You might put jQuery in your app as well and pull in a plugin just because you haven't got time to release, like build something before release and you just chuck it in. Yeah, it's painful, but people do it. So anyway, so let's get back to our... So that's just part of how Architect works, and theming and your classes come together. Associations is another really cool thing inside XJS. It's a bit like your ER inside your database. so you can relate different stores to each other on a model level. So just say you had products and orders, you could just relate them to each other using associations. So then you can pull data both ways without having to configure it heavily. This is pretty much the Sencha data package. So you've got your model, which is effectively like a record. So inside your record, you configure your fields, your associations, your validations. As an XJS5, your validations also push through to your forms, so you can use the same validation on your model and your form without configuring it twice, which is really, really cool. Then obviously inside your store, you can have multiple records or multiple models, so you can then filter, group, or sort them at that level, and then that will reflect through the UI. So in XJS or Sencha Touch, you basically build your views to react to the data layer changing. So all the heavy lifting is going on behind the scenes. And then they've added schema and sessions. So obviously, when you're doing data binding, you need to manage those different relationships. So this is what sessions do. And schemas allow you to also manage your associations and different linkages between your data objects. So these are two new things that have just jumped in XJS5. You can also do chain stores in XJS5. This is something that I've been wanting for years. So this means you can use a subset of the data in a store already, and if you update the main object or any of the sub-objects, so just say you delete a record or add a record in any of them, they'll appear in the other views as well. So you basically, so you can, instead of having to create a store and then copy it out to a second store and then try and manage it, if you do a reload on the main store, then how do you update the secondary store? It's all auto-wired and it's beautiful and it's heaven. It's really cool. It's about time. There's a heap of new widgets. So with every new release, like Sencha's big thing is widgets. XJS has always been miles ahead of everyone for widgets. So they've gone another step ahead. They've added some new ones. There's a nice one, breadcrumb bar, which is a nice kind of hierarchical type deal. There's a multi-select sort of grid sort of component they've got here. They've also added like a Facebook-like tag field. So that's pretty sweet. So you can do multi-selects and then cross them off, and it takes you about 13 seconds to implement, which is really sweet. Tabs, also one of the really cool things, I might jump across to the demo for this, is you can actually not only put the tabs on any side of your component, you can actually spin the titles to any direction. So,
vertical tab.
Yeah, so you can have a vertical tab upside down text. If you really wanted to. Yeah. You wouldn't, but where are we? Tabs. I'm just trying to think where the tab demo is. It's probably in. It might be in the Windows one. Wow, where is it? I'm gonna go for. Might be the kitchen sink example. I've forgotten where it is exactly. Good one. So we'll just load this up again. I'll put it open over here. So where's our tabs? That's all tabs. Here we go. So you can do all sorts of really cool things with tabs out of the box. You can do reordering, all that kind of stuff. Friends tabs, advanced tabs. Okay, so this is where you can. This is showing all the rotations. So you can actually rotate your tabs anyway, and you can put them anywhere. So yeah, later. So you can. This is really cool because in apps, quite often you've got a spec that says I want it to be on that side in this direction, and then you have to sit there and hack the library until it works. And then they put an update out and it breaks everything, and you're like, ah. So this is really cool. So there's some really good variations coming out now. Side navigation. So this is like your classic kind of responsive look and feel.
Still a question.
Yep.
So because you can import different data libraries, so you can theoretically use a Bootstrap theme. Yep. And then put it as part of your package. And it'll just compile and pull it all the way to the phone.
Yes. Yeah, if you're doing touch, yes, do it all the way to the phone. If you're doing desktop, all the way to desktop or web. So yeah, so basically all you do is you'd include that in your resources in Architect, or you'd put that inside your micro loader, which is like the config file if you're doing it manually. It's like a JSON file that you can just put in all sorts of different configurations. And then basically when it compiles, it'll pull that in, minify that too, if you want it to. You could just have it as a separate file if you want to do that too. I mean, it's all run on Ant, so you can do whatever you want. So,
and also, I was going to say,
pretty cool. So,
EXTJS does.
The other, I mean, there's another example of data binding. So it's got your binding basically from your piece of data that's pushed in, and then obviously you're pushing it back off your field back into whatever. So as one thing updates, it pushes it back into the store. So there's heaps of really cool demos. This is the chaining one I was just talking about, so I thought I'd click back to here. So for instance, like this is the whole list up the top, and you'll notice there's like some kids down the bottom. Everyone down the bottom is over 18. So with XJS documentation, they don't just leave you in the lurch. So if you click up on the details tab, it's going to show you all the different files of how they build it. So you can see the models and all the different items here. You can see the view model, and they've also got these filters in here. And this is what's filtering our second grid, is basically that filter property here. So basically this is a real-time grid. So for instance, if we start removing stuff, it's going to remove it out of the bottom one as well as the top one. So if we change a person to a kid, then it's going to knock them out of the bottom. So store chaining is a really cool feature in XJS, and that's it. That's all the code you needed to do to implement it, which is pretty sweet. So basically, you just point your source at that, and then that source points at the original source. So that's pretty cool. The other cool thing about data binding is you can do all formulas and stuff like that. I mean, a lot of this stuff's in Angular and some of the other things that already got data binding, so it's probably not new if you've seen other JavaScript frameworks, but it's pretty sweet. I mean, it just means you can do some really nice effects, especially when you're doing business applications that have all sorts of visualization, calculations. Yeah, so the other thing you can do is grouped header grids. So, you know, like in Excel where you've got multiple columns. Let me just jump this out of the way. So basically, you can still sort on all these columns, and then you've got an overarching column here as well, and you can sort based on different criteria here as well. And you can turn columns on and off, divide the headers. There's so many things you can do with XJS. It's like reconfigure grid. Basically, what this does uses the same grid but pushes two different lots of data into it. So this is offices. Totally different schema, employees. It'll just push it straight into the grid, reform it. So you can do all sorts of things like that. So, and that, people say, well, why would you do that? But when you start to get into some enterprise apps, they just throw you random stuff in the same result set quite often as well. So, and I actually worked on one, can't tell you much more than this, but there's a military app where they had a tree. There was an XML tree. They clicked on a node. They pulled that node of XML out, they edited that XML in a grid, and then pushed it back into the tree, and then saved the whole tree back to the server, and all that sort of stuff. So it made that incredibly easy. Whereas in a normal app, you'd be like, oh man, I've got to get the data out, I've got to manipulate it, I've got to do all these data store stuff. It just made it really, really cool. And then you've got all your kind of expandable stuff. A new thing in XJS 5 is grid filtering is now baked into the grid rather than being an extension. There's our widget grid again. You can pull in all sorts of things, XML, paging grids, and
that paging.
Yep.
Is it paging with your data online already, or are you fetching?
That's fetching. That's the old school way of doing it with the arrows. With the big data, like this particular one, this is pulling thousands of rows, but it's pulling it behind the scenes in pages. Yeah. So it does pre-buffering, so it'll get to a certain stage and then start pulling the feeds. But like, I mean, you look at this.
We still haven't
I can
got-
sit there for days and scroll, and that's just pulling it in as if it's already there. You know, like, I mean, if we sit here,
Is there a trigger point so that when you're scrolling, it
yeah. So
doesn't
if,
fall?
yeah. So, where are we? What have I got? Look at that filter. Oh, have I? Oh, I have. Oh, there you go. So you'd be just seeing them go bang, 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 page after page after page. Otherwise, and basically, what it's doing is it's recycling DOM nodes and throwing them back and forward in a really clever way. And it's doing it on a row by row level. In XJS4, they did it on a cell by cell. They had tables, and they couldn't get the performance out of it. I mean, it was okay, but with 5, it's really quick. As you saw there, that was just.
Are they just Ajax calls in the background?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so it's just pulling it in. And I mean, there's an actual tool inside the toolkit when you download it, and you can say, all right, pull 100,000 records, and you can just sit there scrolling, trying to beat it, and it's really, really fast. So the latency in the feed is really all that's stopping you from showing it. So yeah, the smaller the latency, the better the grid looks. And I mean, obviously, one of the big problems they always had is IE6 and 7. I mean, IE8 is still a bit average as well, but at least that's all we have to deal with in 5. Although for the next 10 years we'll still have to deal with 4 apps probably. So, like everywhere else. So yeah, so it's cool stuff like that. The other thing in XJS5 is I have trouble with this word. Heterogeneous trees, which means that you can basically dictate what the node below that item's going to be, so you can configure different items. So for instance, this is a country node, I mean a region node, a country node, and a city node, and they can have different configurations in models. So it means that if I create another node underneath USA, it's going to create it as a city node. So whereas in the previous library, it just created a node that was a node. So, and then you could decorate it with fancy data underneath and make it look like it was doing something. But so for instance, like if you look here, we click up the top, see if we want to add a country. Okay, good old Cold Fusion caps. We go new country, and then basically if we click on a country, we can add a city. So you can see how your UI can then respond to this as well. So it makes those trees really, really sexy. Yep. I don't know if it's turned on in here, but you can if you want to. Yeah, it's not turned on there, but it's just a feature you turn on, so you can just like basically, yeah, it's out of the box. So, and you can also drag and drop between 2 trees, and all that sort of stuff. That's all out of the box too. So, and you can go between trees to grids and grids to trees, and all that stuff out of the box too. So. You get your checkbox trees, all those things. And this is a variation of grid called tree grid, which is like basically it's a grid that's hierarchical. So yeah, so that's pretty nice too. Quite often people ask for that sort of UI. Just trying to see if there's anything else here. That's tag field. That's one of the new ones. This is like the Facebook type one. So obviously can add all your different items in, and then it just pulls things out. So it's pretty nice. Multi-selected grid. This is another new one that they've added in here. So it's kind of like a gets out of your way type control, which is nice. Field container allows you to create a container that you can fill with other fields. So just say you had like your label on the left and your field on the right, and then someone goes, oh, I want start and end date on the right, but I just want one label on the left. Then what you can do is drag 2 dates in as they have here, and you've just got one field container. It's nicely in your layout. You don't have to worry about all that. And then you've got all your nice little collapsible regions and all those sort of things, all the normal stuff that you would expect. There's a whole bunch of different layouts inside the frameworks as well. Vertical layouts, horizontal layouts, absolute layouts, just about every kind of layout you can think of. And they've added obviously the responsive stuff in there as well. So absolute layout goes absolutely. Accordion, obviously that's your old Outlook 2007, 2003, sorry, whatever. Border layouts like your traditional web app, so you can do north, south, east, west, and center. Card layouts, just basically like your wizards, like you've just got a bunch of layers on top of each other. It's a bit like tabs, but without the tabs, really. Center layout just allows you to center things. Column layout allows you to do columns. Fit layout's like card layout. It's just one item inside the item. Then you've got your horizontal and vertical, all those sort of things. And then you've got your drag and drop libraries all in there as well. So if we drag this, which way is it drag? Oh, wait a minute, drag that text. So here, it's going to replace it. So you can do all sorts of really cool stuff. Drag a record in, grid to grid, that sort of stuff. And you got your different feeds. Cool. All right, so we'll just quickly tail this off. I think I'm just about done here. All right. So then, yeah, so we've already talked about grids and things like that, and the optimizations, so that's about it. So yeah, so that's a quick overview. If you need to know anything else about it, feel free to contact me. I'll put I'm obviously in the group, but you can get me at Sencha Dorsey or Scott Dorsey. I used to have a Twitter handle Dorsey, but I don't use it for work stuff, so I saw a request from you. I was going to tweet you and say use the Sencha Dorsey one, because I don't actively maintain the other one. The other one's more just for personal rubbish. So yeah, so Sencha Dorsey, or get me on Skype at Dorsey, and yeah, I can help you with any of that sort of stuff. That's just be my history, whatever.
Good stuff. Well, thank you,
so cool.
Chris. Thank you.
No worries.
And thank you, Tony, as well.
Yeah. We'll see if he's still there.
Wherever Tony is.
Oh, have we wiped him off? Wiped him off the face of the earth. All right, let's see.
Too many windows.
Oh, man.
Firefox.
Yeah. There we go. Hey!
Still there.
Hi.
Hey, Tony's still there. There you go! Beautiful.
Thanks a lot, guys.
All right. Thanks, Tony.
Good.
I'll talk to you later.
Okay. Cheers. I just published another Sencha Touch Live in the meeting, so got another version up.
Sorry, what was that?
We just published another version up.
Oh, okay, cool. Of ST Live.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. So he's done a fix while he's listening to me yabber on.
Good stuff.
Cool. All right, we'll stop the broadcast here, and I'll catch you when I get home.
Okay.
Bye.
Cheers, mate.
Bye.
Okay. Cheers.
All right, cool.
Bye.
All right,
See ya.
see ya.